This lecture accompanies the General Building Review questions, located at the back of your trade manual. Your instructor is Jack Creel, a licensed California general building contractor with over 25 years' experience. Jack will review each question and answer, starting with number 1. Please be sure to have a pen and highlighter ready to take notes.
Hi, let's get started right away with the general building review questions. I'm going to read the directions to you. This is a multiple choice exam. We've all taken a lot of those. Please read each question carefully and select the best answer. Note that, the best answer. We'll come back to that in a little bit here. From the 4 choices offered in each question. We're going to be doing 7 questions of estimating, and in estimating, questions 1 through 4 refer to the floor plan on the next page. Use the dimensions shown on the floor plan to perform calculations. Do not allow for waste when estimating materials. First question, number 1. How many cubic yards of concrete will be required to pour a patio slab with a thickness of 4 inches? Let's look at our plan. We have a patio out there that is essentially an L-shaped unit. The first thing we will do is to convert it into 2 rectangles. The first rectangle will be 10 foot by 32 foot. So we make a little line right there at the end of the right end of the 32 dimension, such that we have a 10 by 32 and a 10 by 40 rectangle. Now, what we are going to do is figure out first what is the square footage, then the cubic footage, and then finally we're going to convert it to the cubic yard dimension that we need for the concrete. Starting with a 10 by 32, we multiply that and we end up with 320 square feet. We take our second rectangle, which is 10 by 40, and we multiply those two and we end up with 400 square feet. We add those two together and we have 720 square feet. We need to find out how many cubic feet we have, so we need to multiply 720 square feet by the thickness of the slab. If the slab were 1 foot thick, it would end up giving us 720 cubic feet. But it's only 4 inches thick. To figure out how much of a foot or the fraction of a foot we need to multiply by, we simply take 4 inches and put it over 12 inches and end up with a third, or 0.33. Now we take those two numbers, 720 and a third, and multiply those two numbers together. We'll end up with cubic feet. The answer is 240 cubic feet. But we have to convert 240 cubic feet into cubic yards. To do that, we divide by 27 cubic feet per cubic yard. 240 cubic feet divided by 27 cubic feet will convert into 8.88 cubic yards. Now, do we have 8.88 cubic yards in our answer? No. So we begin to look for the best answer. If we round up 8.88, we get to 9. And we do have 9.0 cubic yards. That is the correct answer. So simply circle C and you have the correct answer. Number 2, how many square yards of carpet will be required for the 2 bedrooms? Do not include the closets. Looking at our plan, we can see that the bedroom to the left of the page is 15 by 14. If we look at the other bedroom, we can see that it also has a 14 dimension. Its other dimension is unwritten, but if we look carefully, we can see that it is indeed the same size as the first bedroom. So we have 2 bedrooms that are 14 by 15. 14 times 15 will give us 210 square feet. and we need to double that since we have 2 bedrooms. Then that will give us 420 square feet of carpet needed. But we want to order in square yardage, or get the answer here in square yardage. To do that, we need to divide by 9. We divide 420 square feet by 9, and that will give us 46.6 square yards, which is what we need. We look over to the answers, and again, it's not there in the exact number that we came up with. But if we look at B, we see that B is slightly more than 46.6. And that is the answer that we want. That would indicate that letter B is the ideal or the best answer. Circle B, that is your answer. Number 3, how many square feet of wall paneling will be required for the den? Deduct for 1 4-by-6 foot window, 2 3-by-8 foot doors, and 1 4-foot by 5.5 foot fireplace. What we first have to figure out is what is the length of the wall paneling that we're going to be putting up. To do that, we need to figure out the 4 dimensions of the size of the room. We know that the den is 14 feet on its west side. Of course, it's going to be 14 feet on its east side. So those are 2. Now we need to figure out the other dimensions. If we look on the bottom of the page, we find out, oh, it's also 14 foot. So it's basically a 14-foot square room. We add up all 4 walls' length, 14, 14, 14, and 14. We come up with 56 feet. Now, to get the square footage, we need a height. We would think frequently, well, it's 8 foot, just like most places. But look down in the right-hand corner of the plans. 10-foot ceilings throughout. So this is unusually high for the typical building. So we need to figure 56-foot length times a 10-foot height. And that will give us 560 feet, or square feet. But we have to deduct 4 items. Let's line up those 4 items. The first item is the window, and that's 4 by 6 feet. The second and third item are doorways, each 3 by 8. And the last item is that 4 by 5.5 foot fireplace size. 4 by 6 is 24 square feet. 3 by 8 is 24 square feet. We have a second 24 square feet. Up to now we've had 3 24 square foot deductions. And the last deduction, do a little math on the calculator, and that gives us 22 square feet to deduct. We add those all up, we have 94 square feet. We deduct that amount from the total of 560 square feet that we got a little bit earlier. We end up with 466 square feet is needed to panel that den. On this particular answer, we have that exact number, which of course is letter A. Circle letter A, and that is the correct answer. Number 4. How many square feet of acoustical tile will be required for the family room, living room, and hall? Now, of course, the acoustical tile is going to go right on to the ceiling, which is the same square footage as the floor. So we simply have to figure out what is the square footage of the floor. Let's start with the family room, and then the living room, and then the hall. We know that one dimension of the family room is 16 feet. That's on the left-hand side of the page, or the west side of the house. To figure out the next dimension, we know that across that fireplace wall up to the hall is 14 feet. And if we go up to the end of the counter, look on your plan there, up to the end of the counter, we will have gone across the same width as those two closets toward the bottom of the page. So we will have gone another 2 plus 2 feet, another 4 feet. Now we are at 18 feet. So we can put 18 feet as a dimension. You can write it right in on the plan, and that gives us the size of the living room. Now we've simply determined that the living room is going to end where the counter begins. Now what is the length of the counter? Because that will give one dimension for the living room. That is 14 feet. If we look in the bottom of the page, we will see that that bedroom at the bottom of the page is just as wide as the counter. So we can put 14 feet right above the counter. And the living room, the other dimension for the living room is 14 feet, and you can find that over on the right-hand side of the page. Now we have to figure out the dimension of the hallway. If you look at the bottom of the plan, you can see that the two closets are each 2 feet wide. And looking carefully, you can see that the closets are just as wide as the hall. So we know that the hall is 4 feet wide, and we can write that in on our plan, 4 feet. What is the length of the hall? Well, we know that it goes the full length of the den, and the full length of the den, as you can see on the left-hand side of the page, is 14 feet. But we still have to go a couple of feet at least into the bedroom. If we look carefully, there's a 12-foot dimension in the bedroom on the right, and that shows exactly where the hall ends. We look on the left on the other bedroom, we see a dimension of 15 feet, and that shows us exactly where we have to begin that final measurement for the hall. We subtract the 12 feet from the 15 feet, we end up with 3 feet. We have 3 feet added to the original 14 feet that we started with. We get 17 feet for the full length of the hallway. Now we need to do a little bit of math. We take our family room, which is 16 by 18 feet. We multiply that and we end up with 288 square feet. We do the multiplication for the living room, which is 14 times 14, and we end up with 196 square feet. And we do the final the final math for the hallway, which is 4 by 17 feet, and that comes out to be 68 square feet. We add those three numbers together, 288, 196, and 68. That will give us exactly 552 square feet of acoustical tile that we need for those three rooms. And that happens to be the answer at B. Circle B, that is the correct answer. Number 5. What is the total volume of the building shown below? Building, of course, is a basic gable house. We're going to figure it in two parts. The volume within the walls and then the volume within the roof space. But let's figure out the dimensions first. We have all the dimensions we need except for one. The last dimension that we need is the dimension between the peak of the roof and the top plate of the end wall there. And we can figure that out very simply by subtracting 15, which is that height, from 20. So we need to draw a little line from the peak of the roof down to the top plate and put in 5 feet there. Now we have all the dimensions that we need. Figuring the volume for the four walls is simple. It goes length times width times height. So that would be the length, 100, times 40, times 15. We would end up with an answer of 60,000 cubic feet. Now we need to go to the the volume taken in by the roof. Since we have a triangle at the end there, we have a slightly different formula. It indeed is the length times the width times the height, but because it's a triangle, we have to add in 1/2. So we would multiply 1/2, or 0.5, times 100 times 40 times 5. We should come up with an answer of 10,000 cubic feet. We add 10,000 cubic feet to the 60,000 cubic feet. We should come up with 70,000 cubic feet, and that is the answer at letter B. Circle B, and we're good to go to the next question. Number 6. What is the length of the hypotenuse of a right triangle where both sides are 4 feet long? There are a number of ways to do this, but the most standard way is to use the Pythagorean theorem. And that theorem simply states that with a right triangle, if you take the two sides and square the dimension of each of those sides and add them together, it equals the square of the third side, or the long side, that is the hypotenuse. Or in terms of letters, A, one leg squared, plus B, the other leg squared, equals C, the hypotenuse squared. Let's make a few substitutions here. It's 4 squared plus 4 squared equals C squared. 4 squared equals 16 plus 4 squared, 16 equals 32. We now have 32 equaling C squared, which is the hypotenuse. We put 32 into our calculator and we hit the square root button, and that will give us the answer for C. We should come up with 5.66, and that indeed is the answer at letter B. Circle letter B, we're in good shape. Number 7. What is R when N equals 31.5 and the pitch equals 1/6? Now what the pitch means simply is this, that for every 6 feet that we go, we move along a horizontal line, we need to raise up by 1 foot. So if we go 6 feet over, we go up 1 foot. If we go 12 feet over, we go up 2 feet. We're going to be going over 31.5 feet in the N dimension. We have to figure out how high we will go in the R dimension. To do that, we simply divide 31.5 by 6. And that will tell us that we have to go up 5.25 feet in the R dimension for the 31.5 feet that we've gone in the N dimension. 5.25 converts to 5 feet, and 0.25 simply means that it's 3 inches when we do that conversion. The answer is B, 5 feet 3 inches. Number 8. Which of the following wires has the largest cross-sectional area? Now, while it would seem that as the numbers got smaller, the wires got smaller, it's the exact reverse. So actually, your number 0 wire is the biggest, number 2 wire is slightly smaller, and of these 4 sizes, the number 6 is the smallest wire. The answer would obviously be D, circle D. Number 9. What size aluminum conductor would carry the same electrical current as a 14 gauge copper conductor? The answer on this is B, 12 gauge. 14 gauge is slightly smaller than 12 gauge. Aluminum doesn't carry quite as much electrical capacity as copper does. A 14 and a 12 are pretty close when you compare copper and aluminum. So the answer is B, 12 gauge. Number 10. When installed below grade, rigid metal conduit must be buried at least 6 inches. Letter A. Number 11. Which of the following is not acceptable when making electrical connections? Wire nut, split bolt, compression ring, twist wires, and wrap with electrical tape. Select D, because that is the correct answer. Think about it a little bit. That electrical tape is very thin. Those wires can poke out. As soon as they poke out of that electrical tape, then they are at risk of causing a short. The other three methods are standard, acceptable NEC or National Electric Code methods of doing it. Number 12, what determines the number of outlets in a 20 amp circuit? That answer is NEC and local codes, letter A, circle A. 13, what is the minimum number of dedicated circuits required for a residential kitchen? It is it's letter C, 2 20 amp circuits. 14, what determines water pressure in a house? Type of fixtures, available pressure, length of pipe, or all of the above? Actually, it's all of the above. The longer the pipe, the lower the pressure will become. The available pressure, of course, that's an obvious answer. And the type of fixtures. If you have a fixture with a small orifice, your pressure will be relatively low. Number 15. The term bushing refers to a plumbing fitting. If you've done enough plumbing, you'll figure out after a while that bushing refers to an item that goes into a bigger pipe to reduce the size of that pipe. 16. Soldering of a copper pipe fitting is completed when A, it is a ½ inch thick, the surface is oxidized, solder appears all around the joint, or surface flux is removed with a damp cloth. C, solder appears all around the joint. I've been doing soldering for many years of my life. I still really enjoy doing it. There's kind of a magical moment when you can see the solder just all of a sudden slip around and come out as though as a magical ring appears. And that indeed is the correct answer. 17. The water supply pressure to a building must be at least B, 15 psi. It's just a number you need to know. It's one of those pieces of knowledge you really can't figure out. You just have to know it. 18. The minimum size vent permitted for a shower is 1½ inches. B. 19. How long should cement be mixed before it is poured? The minimum is 3 minutes. Again, this is one of those things you simply have to know. 20. How soon should you pour concrete after you have mixed it without additives? A ½ hour. That's the ideal time. Number 21. Rebar in concrete beams and girders must have a minimum cover of 1½ inches. You'll find out that in other spots where concrete is placed, there's other minimum dimensions. But for concrete beams and girders, it is 1½ inches. Number 22. Number 8 rebar has a diameter of approximately 1 inch, letter D. The number in any rebar designation simply means the number of eighths. So if you're talking about number 4 bar, which is very common, that simply means 4/8 or ½ inch bar. Number 5 would be 5/8, slightly larger, so on and so forth. Number 23. What is the first step when finishing a concrete slab? Once that concrete is out of the truck and it's down on the pile, it's been moved around, the first step to do is to screed it. In other words, to get a rough, level surface on it. And it's usually done with a 2x4 and 2 men on either end of that 2x4. Number 24. The most common material used for concrete forms is, and I'll be careful here, you've got hardboard, steel, reinforced plastic, and plywood. The answer in this question is plywood. If we had 2x4 as any one of those answers, that would be the answer. 25. A concrete mix ratio of 1:3:6 is classified as lean. If you can remember that the standard mix is a 1 in 7, or 1 part in 7, a 1, 2, 4 indicating 1 part of cement, 2 parts of fine aggregate, 4 parts of large aggregate, then that can help you determine whether you've got a rich or a lean mixture. Number 26. The slump test is used to determine B, the consistency of a concrete mix. If you look at those last two, compressive strength of a finished concrete slab and flexural strength of a concrete beam, those are done after the concrete has set up and gathered all its strength. Those first two are tests before the concrete is set. Number 27. What size concrete footing is required for a foundation supporting a 1-story building? The answer is 6 by 12. That's the minimum size footing. As you go to a 2-story building or a 3-story building, that is going to change by specific numbers. But for a simple 1-story building, a 6-inch thick by 12-inch wide footing is sufficient. Number 28. The top of a foundation wall supporting wood framing must be at least what? Above finished grade. And the answer is 6 inches. And of course that's to inhibit termites from crawling up that space and getting into the wood building. Number 29. According to the Uniform Building Code, a concrete floor slab on grade must be at least what thick? The answer is 3.5 inches thick. And that is easy to remember since a 2x4, which is very common forming material, is 3.5 inches wide. That gives you automatically that 3.5 inch thick concrete slab. Number 30. A contractor is adding a room to a 1960 original construction, built to 1960 codes. Which of the following best reflects the permit requirements for the existing and new construction? The answer is B. The 1960 portion of the house, with the exception of the smoke detectors, doesn't have to be updated. 31. What is the minimum height of a handrail on a handicapped ramp? The answer is 34. You actually have a tolerance between 34 and 38, but the minimum is 34. And the handrail is what you grab with your hand as you go up that ramp. 32. Handrails must be, the answer is, no more than 2 inches in diameter. Number 33. What is the minimum dimension of a handicapped landing with no doors? The answer is C, 5 foot by 3 foot. The minimum width of any handicap ramp is at least 3 feet. When you get to the landing at a door that does not swing onto the landing, you need to have a minimum length of 5 feet. So the answer is 5 feet by 3 feet. Number 34. When a handicap door is fully open, 90 degrees, what is the required minimum clear width of the exitway? The answer is 32 inches. If you measure, it usually comes out on a 36-inch door, which is the minimum, about 32.5, maybe 32 3/4, somewhere in that range, which gives you the minimum. Number 35. What is the minimum height for a kick plate on a door? The kick plate on the door actually helps the person in the wheelchair get through the door without their footrest getting caught on the door. So it's an important piece of accessibility. And that minimum height is 10 inches. Number 36. If unused mortar stiffens due to hydration of cement, what must you do? So in other words, the question asks, you're laying brick, the mortar that you're using begins to get stiff, it's beginning to set up. Can you add a little water? Can you retemper it, which is pretty much the same thing? What's the correct answer? No, you need to discard it and start anew with a fresh batch of mortar. So the answer would be discard the mortar, C. When would you wet concrete masonry blocks, sometimes known as CMUs or concrete masonry units? The answer is never. An interesting item that perhaps not too many people know, that when concrete blocks get wet, they swell by a little bit. And when they lose that water, they shrink by a little bit. So if you mortar together slightly wet blocks and they dry out, they will shrink and cause cracks. So you definitely want to make sure that you have a dry block. And actually, if you are in Arizona and you receive blocks from some other place, you want to make sure that they really dry out. Because again, if you receive a block on Monday, lay it on Monday, you may be finding that by the end of the week in that Arizona area that it's shrinking and you're getting way too many cracks. Number 38. A brick wall pattern consists of alternating headers and stretchers in each course. This type of bond is called, now a header is the normal position of a brick, 8 inches wide by about 2.5 inches high. You see that face. A header is when you see just the end of the brick, that 4 by 2.5 inch. So you have a long one, then you have a short one, and you have a long one and a short one. And in the next unit, next row, you have a short one and a long one, a short one and a long one. That happens to be called a Flemish bond. Letter C. Number 39. In a 3-coat plastering process, what is the first coat called? The answer is scratch. Why is it called a scratch coat? Simple. First coat goes on and it goes over usually metal lath or lath of some sort or another. And then the good plasterer will take a tool that looks like a great big huge comb. It'll make a lot of scratches, usually diagonal one way and diagonal another way, through that fresh coat of plaster or stucco. And that helps the second coat, which is called the brown coat, adhere much better because there's a whole lot of irregular little voids and valleys for that second coat to adhere to. So that first coat is called the scratch coat. Number 40. Of the following, which type of gypsum plaster would be used for a finished coat? The answer is Keen's cement. Those first three, the neat, the bond, and the wood fiber, those are all scratch coats or base coats. But the Keen's cement is the answer. You might remember it by using this little trick. Keen's cement will give you a keen, smooth finish. And that's what you're looking for in your finished coat. Number 41. In general, drywall screws should be spaced no more than what on ceilings? And the answer is 12 inches. Actually, all of those answers in that choice there, 6 inches, 7 inches, 12 inches, 16 inches, are correct answers, but for different applications. 6-inch and 7-inch refers to nails. 12-inch and 16-inch refers to screws. The 16-inch application would be on the wall. Again, the 12-inch would be on the ceiling. Number 42. How far away from the edge of the drywall should you place the nails or screws? The ideal spacing is 3/8 of an inch. It's about the thickness of your little finger. Number 43. Which of the following insulating materials has the lowest R value? The answer is mineral wool. And you might get this more by experience than by simply reading. If you've ever been in an older house and seen mineral wool spread around, you can see a lot of voids, a lot of air spaces, and that lowers the insulating value of any material. Cellulose is generally a little more compact, a little more evenly distributed. And then the other two, polystyrene and polyurethane, those are sheets of insulating material. And those sheets, those usually rigid foam sheets, are much better. Number 44. Which of the following building materials offers the most insulation? Wood, brick, concrete, or aluminum? Now, aluminum is a great conductor, not only of electricity, but also of heat, so that's one of the worst insulators. Concrete and brick are pretty dense, and they will also allow transference of heat, although slowly. Wood is not nearly as dense, and of those four, wood is clearly the best choice, so the answer there would be A. Number 45. How many nails are used on a standard 3-tab shingle? Now, a 3-tab shingle, of course, is almost always 3 feet long. You put one nail at the beginning, which is at the 0 point. Then you put the next 3 nails at the 12-inch, the 24-inch, and the 36-inch point. So you end up with 4 nails. Answer being C. Number 46. In general, how many nails are required to fasten a wood shingle or shake? The answer on that is 2, and it's usually in 1/2 inch to 1 inch from each edge. Answer is B. Number 47. The lower exposed edge of a shingle is commonly called the butt. Now, I happen to have family that had a family farm, and on the north side we had some old wood shingles. And along the edge, on that butt edge, you could see where the moss had grown over the many years, if not decades, of opportunity. And that's called, again, the butt end. 48. Which roof type slopes in 4 directions? Is it the shed, the mansard, the gambrel, or the hip? The answer is hip. 49. When you start to frame a wall, which members are laid out first? This question indicates what's the lowest member here. And that, of course, would be the sill plate, the bottom plate. Letter C. Number 50. A 2x6 that is 8 feet long equals how many board feet? The answer is 8 board feet. How do you figure a board foot? Simple. You take the dimension of the piece, in this case, 2 inches by 6 inches, and you multiply the 2. You get 12 inches, and you divide that answer by 12 inches. In this case, on a 2x6, you have 1 board foot for each lineal foot. Since you have 8 lineal feet in this board, you have 8 board feet as well. Number 51. In general, at least how many wood studs would be installed at corners of exterior walls? The answer is 3, and it is typically done in what's called a California corner. It has a specific design and makes efficient use not only of wood but also of time. Number 52. What is the correct space or gap between a finished floor and bottom of an interior door with no threshold? The ideal gap is, last answer there, 1/2 of an inch. Number 53. The phrase dropping a stringer means to balance stairs, to allow for the thickness of the first tread, to snap a chalk line from the stair stringer, or to dangle a plumb line when laying out the stringer. Well, it's actually B, to allow for the thickness of the first tread. Number 54. What is the minimum tread depth for interior stairs? The answer is 11 inches, C. It's a very common item that you should know. Most everybody should know that one. Number 55. What is the tolerance for a stairway riser? In other words, if you go from riser to riser up the stairs, what's the maximum amount that those risers can change from one to another? And the answer is C, 3/8 of an inch. If it gets larger than that, those stairs can be quite dangerous. And if you look at the code sometime, you'd be amazed how thick the part on stair construction is. Why? Stairs are one of the most dangerous parts of a house. And the code wants to make sure that stairs are done correctly. And this is part of it. Number 56. The rough opening around a door should be C, 2 inches side to side, 2 inches in height, plus the height of the finished floor. So if you're installing a 36-inch door by 80-inch door, then your rough opening would be 36 plus 2, 38 in the width. And then 80 inches plus 2 would make it bring it up to 82 inches. And if you were laying down a 1-inch thick floor, then you'd add another inch, and that would bring it up to 83 inches would be your rough opening. Number 57. What is the standard depth of a base cabinet? Standard depth of a base cabinet is 24. Number 58. What is the standard height of kitchen cabinets? Now, the staff got together and we discussed this question. We finally figured out what the question is actually asking is, once the cabinet is completed with its countertop, what is the standard height? And of course that would be 36 inches. Without that countertop height, it's usually 34, 34 and a half. But figure on this question, we're asking about the finished or with the countertop height. Again, 36 inches. Number 59. What is specified by the term penny in reference to nails? The answer is size. More than anything else, it refers to the length of the nail, but it also refers to the diameter of the nail. So we're talking about 2 dimensions, really. So we're talking a more general number, and this would be size. Where's the D come from? You know, it actually comes from Roman times, when the Roman coin at that time was called a denarius, beginning with a D, of course, and that's come through the centuries. And the Roman influence into British area also brought that same term, the D, in. And the final result is, to this day, some 2,000, 2,500 years later, we still are using that term to indicate an item of many, many years ago. 60. What is the minimum size for anchor bolts? Anchor bolts, of course, those are the bolts that go into the concrete while it's still wet and helps hold down your mud sill or your mud plate down. And that diameter is 1/2 an inch. Number 61. What is the best method for installing drywall? Pretty much what you see almost exclusively today, and that is screws. Letter B. Number 62. In houses designed for passive solar heating, the walls with large windows should face south. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. That's the direction in which you're going to get your most gain from sun. Number 63. What is the most effective method when preparing the surface of a metal frame for painting? Now, all of these methods will do a certain kind of a job, but the most effective is going to be sandblasting. That's going to get more paint off than anything else and leave you an excellent surface to put the new coat of paint on. Number 64. What is the most likely cause of alligatoring? This is the paint term, and it indicates a failure in the paint. Although actually in some situations people will choose it for the sake of its artistic look and control it and create it. And what brings it about? D. Paint is applied over a wet coat. So if you're the creative one, you can create that alligator look by doing that purposely. But generally, as a day in and day out painter, you don't want any alligators on your wall. 65. Tailgate safety meetings must be conducted at least, and the answer is A, every 10 days. Let me give you a little suggestion here. If you're ever in the middle of a test and you're not sure on a safety question, it's generally better to go to the safest and most conservative answer. In this case, it would be the most often. And in this case, it happens to be correct. Number 66. Monitoring and medical records relating to asbestos exposure must be kept for at least 6 months, 1 year, 10 years, 30 years. And the answer is 30 years. That's a very conservative number. Why? Well, one of the reasons could well be that it takes such a long time for asbestos to develop the damage that it can cause, sometimes 20 to 25 years, that those people in the medical profession that want to know how it originated and who is responsible need to go back some 30 years at least to find out. Number 67. A stepladder must not be taller than, the answer is 20 feet. Now, in the many years that I've been in construction, I don't think I've seen a 20-foot stepladder. I've seen some 16-foot stepladders that are no fun to handle unless you have 2 people. And I've seen some maybe 12 or 14-foot stepladders in my granddad's peach orchard, but I don't think I've ever seen a 20-foot stepladder. But the answer is actually 20 feet. Number 68. The safest way to handle asbestos is when it is C, wet. And that's the first thing that any asbestos remover does, is to wet down the asbestos, and then he begins to remove it. Under very strict conditions, of course. Number 69. When a scaffold is over 7.5 feet, what are required? And the answer is railings. Basically a railing about 3 feet tall, making it a little bit safer up there for you, so that if you slip, you can catch a railing instead of hitting the ground. Number 70. Who is primarily responsible for safety at the job site? Now, this first answer kind of tickles me when they talk about the lawyer there. I don't think any contractor would want a lawyer on the job site all the time there. The real and correct answer is B, employer and employee. An employer needs to let the employee know the need for safety. In the long run, it is a lot more economical to be safe on the job than not. Number 71. When working around electrical equipment, what type of ladder should you use? Aluminum, steel, fiberglass, or none of the above? Actually, the aluminum and steel are quite dangerous when used around electrical equipment. If you should by chance happen to move that ladder into contact with a live wire, it's an excellent conductor and you don't want to be anywhere near that ladder. Fiberglass does not conduct electricity very well at all. So fiberglass would be the answer. Number 72. If a scaffold is constructed with 2 ladders and a plank, how far can the plank be above the ground? The answer is 16 feet. Anything beyond that, you need to be into a different type of scaffolding system. I'd like to thank you for your time. I appreciate you doing the hard work of studying. Study well. Take the time to do it. Go over those tests. Make sure you get each and every one. If you're a little confused, see if you can get a little help on them. And make sure you check up not only on the tests, but also on the updates. And again, thank you very much for your interest and your time.